Danke für die Einladung. Es freut mich sehr, hier zu sein. Und wenn Sie mir erlauben, ich werde auf Englisch sprechen. Aber es ist gut zu wissen, dass ich alles verstehe. Also deshalb wollte ich Ihnen zuerst auf Deutsch diese Sätze sagen. So it is a great challenge to summarize the region as there will be topics focused on the separate countries. As I see in the agenda later on, I will try to remain kind of general, looking at the entire region and address those issues which are general issues and which are shaping the future of the region as the Western Balkans region. First, I would like to start with an observation which adds to this very colorful picture of the Western Balkans and the situation, what we can find there. Last week, maybe the last Yugoslav souls died, as it was defined by some of the authors. It was Đorđe Balašević, a very famous singer, musician, and songwriter from Novi Sad, Serbia, who declared himself as a Yugoslav artist. And he was perceived as a real Yugoslav artist. So for one day, because of his death, people from all around the ex-Yugoslav countries united in remembering him. It was happening in Ljubljana, in Zagreb, in Split, in Rijeka, in Sarajevo, Banja Luka, Mostar, Skopje, Podgorica, Belgrade, Novi Sad. All over the ex-Yugoslav countries, people were kind of trying to express their gratitude to the messages, what this artist was trying to communicate during all these years, and demonstrated something what also Tim Judah from The Economist once formulated as the existence of a so-called Yugosphere. And that is, we have to say this because in spite of the very difficult recent past of this region, in spite of the still existing wants and issues and problems, there is also a genuine interest in cooperating, in communicating, in connecting. And that is based on joint interests and a common history, but also the fact that people understand each other in a very easy way in some of the cases, among some of the countries because of the joint language, which we call our language. Some even say it's 4 languages and one literature, because you can buy books wherever you go. In these countries, the very same books you can find in every bookstore. And we are all reading authors from all these countries. Some of them have to be translated, obviously, coming from the countries which do not speak our language, but some others can be read in their original languages. On the other hand, there are the still existing bilateral disputes, which are very much, which are great obstacles, unfortunately, on the development path of this region. And it is a fact, what we can observe on a daily basis, that while at the same time bridges are built, on the other hand, the domestic publics are fueled against their neighbors. And unfortunately, that is the case in most of these countries, exercised by some of the leaders of these countries of the region. So one of the greatest issues and the larger issues still existing in the Western Balkans is the bilateral disputes, even though in 2015, in the framework of the Berlin process, the first declaration on the commitment to resolve all existing bilateral disputes was signed in Vienna at the Western Balkan Summit, and it got its very strong place and role in the Berlin process to be followed up and worked on in order to remove this obstacle, which is there hindering efficient regional cooperation and good neighborly relations, not to mention the reconciliation efforts, which are the most important for the societies in these countries, countering the exclusive and divisive ethno-nationalist narratives is a very difficult task, which is still out there. But what is the region today? It is enclosed by the EU and the NATO. And the countries, all these countries are deeply merged into the EU in geographic, political, economic, financial, and human terms. And nowhere else have the EU and its member states invested so much political capital in the past 3 decades as in these countries. And now with the COVID-19 pandemics, we see that this interdependence have been confirmed in the most brutal way between the EU and the Western Balkans, but it also showed how much, again, the region itself must focus on cooperation, exchange, and find ways for fighting together this newest challenge. How important solidarity is demonstrated on daily basis. Luckily, we can also see positive developments in this direction in very, very concrete ways between some of the countries. When it's to exchange of information, when it comes even to providing vaccines, for example, as Serbia provided free vaccines to Macedonia, to Northern Macedonia. So there are positive examples which show that regional cooperation is happening on daily basis. And I will come to this as a special focus during this discussion to see in which ways has regional cooperation developed during these past decades. This pandemic has revealed another thing, and that is the fragility of Western Balkan state system. And it hit the region, which is already contested by the long and uncertain EU accession process, poor economic performance, weak democratic institutions, insufficient rule of law, authoritarian tendencies in some of the countries, questionable freedom of expression and media freedom, unresolved bilateral issues, as I already said. And we also have to mention that for the first time since 2003, Serbia and Montenegro last year were no longer categorized as democracies in nations in transit report. At the same time, in March last year, Northern Macedonia joined NATO as its 30th member, and the EU member states finally gave the green light to Northern Macedonia and Albania to start the accession talks. This positive decision happened after the very dramatic, decision in 2019, which was basically provoked by the French, on not opening negotiations with these countries, and this was unfortunately a very negative message, and it was not very much contributing to the credibility of the accession and to the support of the difficult reform processes which have to take place in these countries. The pandemic also brought public health and food security policy into the limelight, as it revealed serious vulnerabilities in the Western Balkan countries in these two domains. It is, of course, very important to look into the competitiveness of these countries and the improvement of environment for investment, especially in the light of economic recovery and growth of the Western Balkan countries' economies as a priority which has to be considered in the post-pandemic period. The Thessaloniki summit and the Thessaloniki promise at the summit was given to these countries in 2003. The European perspective was opened for the Western Balkans, and the agenda that was promoted then has hardly been completed to date. Contrary to the expected results of the accession process, these countries have experienced varying democratic regression in a serious demographic and economic situation, which is playing into hands of re-emerging third powers engaged in the Balkans. There are many discussions on the role of Russia, China, Turkey, and especially now with the vaccination policies of these countries, these topics and these concerns re-emerged, especially in the case of Serbia, who indeed has a very successful vaccination procedure where a large percentage of the population has been already vaccinated, even compared to some of the EU member states. On the other hand, it opens then the questions again about how much is Serbia under the influence of China and Russia compared to complying with the EU policies. The recent developments, unfortunately, when it comes to the Western Balkans EU relations, indicate a tendency to rather keep the Western Balkans at arm's length from EU membership for some time to come. On the other hand, if we look at this situation, this challenge, what we are facing now all together, in order for Europe to get fit for the next period, it must to address issues in cooperation with this region, which is in its immediate neighborhood, and the Western Balkans should be encouraged to pull their weight in the efforts to renew the political shape of Europe. Europe must become fit as a whole, including the Western Balkans, and involving the Western Balkans in finding solutions and contributing to the policies which must be developed for this next period of time. On the other hand, of course, the Western Balkans must focus on its reform agenda. It must have a genuine reform process in order to comply with the requirements to fulfill the conditions which are on its way for the EU accession. Regional cooperation, which is one of the conditions, but also which is basically the condition for a normal everyday life in these countries, having in mind the natural connections and the necessities, and also the joint focus and joint objectives of this region which only require cooperation and communication. Regional cooperation has undergone a fundamental shift over the past decades. And nowadays, its principal goal is to kickstart economic recovery, economic growth, and development. There is an urgent need to redefine and rationalize regional cooperation nowadays and further develop a sense of nurturing regional identity. It is also a need to use all the achieved results, to use the fact that there are over 70 regional cooperation initiatives running and existing nowadays in this region, and to consider in which way the results of the Berlin process can be also used in the most efficient way for the benefits. I am coming to an end saying that according to the Balkan Barometer of 2020, regional cooperation is considered as important by 77% of citizens of the region. There are very positive outcomes, and I'm insisting on this because it is not visible. We are always discussing the challenges, the problems. I myself started with bilateral disputes. On the other hand, there are concrete results. Just mentioned the agreement, for example, between Serbia and Albania, that the citizens of these two countries can cross borders with their biometric ID cards, or the roaming costs, which have been decreased, and roaming between these countries will be completely abolished by July next year, etc., etc. There are many, many concrete examples to see how regional cooperation exists, but it is not happening only on the highest level. It is not happening only between the governments. It is also happening in every sphere of the society. A great challenge, which we have to mention before I finish, is the dramatic depopulation and brain drain from this region, from all the countries. Some of the countries are affected more, some less. However, some even mention the term democracy drain, because this phenomenon definitely is also very dangerous when it comes to the democratic developments in these countries. And finally, there is still a need for a growing culture of regional cooperation. What means that there is a broad sense in the societies that this is the way to advancement and developments in all the countries of the region, and in a joint development, and with a focus on a joint European future. Thank you very much.